22 million views later, we're very active in podcasting. I'm 84 years old. The next thing I remember is the Allied forces landed in Normandy. I had exactly $25.47.
Wow.
I always make my bed. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. What I needed is $25,000 to start a lumber company. I heard Bain, give him the money. Give him. You're doing podcasting, you're doing books, you have 10 companies, you do this, that, and the other thing. I said, ADHD, that's how.
DMT, dimethyltryptamine. You see a UFO, there's, spirit guy, praying mantis. You talk to God, you go into the universe.
How do you find out about it?
His name is Jerry Powell. He had this experience and it literally changed his life. So Joe Rogan, I don't know if he's ever done ayahuasca. Ron White is on the board of directors at this place, Rhythmia.
Oh, no, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, you should look into it.
We'll give you a 5-star, obviously.
Right back
And I
at
think
you.
you're doing the right thing. You're going to be successful. The key is from my perspective, staying the course. I'm just being me.
Welcome back to the Tim Teaches podcast. I'm your host, Tim McCoy. Today, I'm honored to be joined by John Brink. John is a self-made entrepreneur, author, philanthropist, and podcast host. He's also a bodybuilder. In 1965, John immigrated to Canada after surviving Nazi-occupied Holland during World War II. In 1975, John founded the Brink Group of companies and is currently the president and CEO. John, welcome to Tim Teaches.
Yeah, love to do your podcast, Tim.
Thank you so much for joining me. And you have a very long and incredible story, and it starts way back. But just kind of as an icebreaker, I'd love to get your take on how you got into podcasting and how long you've been doing it, and then we'll back up and kind of work our way through your life, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so about 6-7 years ago already, I did blogging, more local or regional. I'm in central British Columbia, Canada, so about 500 miles north of Vancouver. So we have a city of about 80,000 people. And so we started doing blogging, and then I liked that. And then what I slowly did is worked with a local television station and do some podcasting-y thing, and it was fairly new then, and again on a local basis, and then COVID came, and we couldn't do that anymore. Then we said, what do we do now? Well, I had an apartment here in Prince George, and I was not using it all that much, and say, well, then I debated, well, maybe what we have to do to get more people. I had also an apartment in Vancouver and said, well, maybe I have to set up a studio in Vancouver, one in Prince George.
Mm-hmm.
And then the more we thought about that, the more we started looking at television and looking at CNN, ABC, and all the other stations. And you see all these interviews, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 different people on it from all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
That was becoming more and more seamless, and saying, why don't we start doing virtual?
Mm-hmm.
And so we started doing that. And then the next one was, where do we find the candidates or the people to interview? And then we looked at Podmatch and got involved with them. And that started probably about 4 years or so ago. And 22 million views later, we're very active in podcasting. I think this morning I did number 365 or so, I guess, that I'm hosting. Yeah. And then I've done probably some 200 where I'm guesting. And I think today we'll be at 700,000 subscribers on YouTube. Whoa. So it is amazing. And I'm not bragging. I'm excited about it because I know that podcasting, relatively new, but it's only on its infancy. It is expanding and exploding worldwide, globally. So, in thinking about now, keep going on the podcasting, but also building a platform So
Yeah.
I'm and then I'm 84 years old. I was born in 1940. For an old guy, no technology, I'm very, very excited about it.
Man, that's incredible. I mean, 700,000 subscribers is that's huge. You know, if anybody knows about podcasting or just YouTube channels in general, I mean, it's, you know, people are happy if they hit 1,000 subscribers, literally, you know, and so that's incredible. And you must be doing something right, obviously.
Well, it's just basically being me, and and I love it in interacting with the global world around us and trying to keep it interesting.
Yeah.
But it's the new media, Tim, as you well know. It's something that's of interest to people, either listening, watching, and listening, and it connects everybody much more so than the old media does, like newspapers and local television and all the other things. This is global. And in our podcasting, I'm not sure how you are doing it, but I did a podcast this morning with somebody in Miami and a blind guy actually,
Oh,
and
wow.
and that podcast will be released this afternoon. So that's kind
Yeah.
of what I do. We podcast for about an hour and do about uh 4 or 5 podcasts a week, do about 1 or 2 where I'm guesting on other podcasts, and then we like to get it out in the field as quickly as you can. But I'm
Yeah.
really, really excited about it. I love it.
Oh yeah, that's incredible. You're putting in the work, putting in the reps, and that's why you have so many subscribers. And that's what it takes
Right.
is consistency and just keep grinding until it grows. And
Exactly.
man, that's exciting. What type of people are you normally having on as guests? Is it the spectrum is wide open, or do you have kind
It
of a genre?
is it is wide open. Everything from one extreme to the others. A business, it may be this morning, as I indicated. I had a fellow that is visual challenged, and an amazing individual, actually, blind and has an amazing reputation. Last week we had somebody from Athens. We have had people from Australia on all kinds of different topics. I
Yeah,
never know what will happen,
yeah,
and I
that's
love that.
I love it. It's incredible. Zoom has opened up just the internet has opened up the world for everybody because, you know, there's a lot of people who can't leave their house. A blind fella, I mean, there's no way he'd be able to have a podcast, you know, it would be very difficult for him, you know. And so
Exactly.
that's incredible. So, um, yeah, I started this journey about 4 months ago. I'm up to 17,000 subscribers, so it's growing a little bit.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
I'm
Stay the
I'm
course.
excited about it, but I couldn't do it without people like you, so I really appreciate it. If you wouldn't mind, I know you've been on this many podcasts and everything, so you probably told this story a million times, but just kind of a little bit of background on you to share with my viewers, I'd really
Sure.
appreciate it.
So, as I already said earlier, I was born in 1940, actually in Holland, and the extreme northeastern part of Holland. And as you already know, and your guests likely know, is that Hitler started invading Poland, the dictator that started the Second World War. And then, just for my family, my mom and dad got married in 1938. They were in love. My dad worked in a lumber mill. They rented a house and fairly quickly had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. And then my mother was pregnant with me. I would be born November the 1st, 1940. And then, my dad got drafted into the Dutch army in April of 1940. And the last they heard from him when he was seen in Rotterdam just before it got bombed, where the Germans didn't feel that Holland cave in quick enough, and so they bombed the downtown of Rotterdam, a huge city, and thousands of people died. So my family and my mom in particular for 5 years would not know if he lived or died.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so she had the 2 little kids already and then pregnant with me. when I was born, the first thing that I remember, about 3.5 years old, was hundreds of bombers in the air that were bombing the German army infrastructure. And again, visualize northeastern Holland. We were about 10 minutes from the border with Germany, and right across the border where Germany touched the North Sea, where was a lot of the infrastructure that built weapons and all kinds of other things for the German Air Force and Army. And so the hundreds of bombers in the air from the Allied forces that were bombing that kind of infrastructure. And my mom would take us outside on the flat roof behind our deck because she felt safer outside than inside. And in the distance, we see the cities red, the skies be red of the cities burning that were being bombed. And the next thing that I remember is that 1944, and it was we were cut off of food supply to Holland, most of Holland, and we used to go, my brother, my sister, and myself, every morning we would go with gunny sacks into the railroad yard, pick up anything edible and burnable. And then the other part that happened in Holland is the winter of 1944-45 was the coldest one on the record. And I still remember from 1944 the feeling of hunger, even now, 80 years later. And then the fear of the cold. We had a little part of our house heated where we could sit around a little heater because we didn't have enough fuel. And then the next thing I remember is the Allied forces, as everybody knows, landed in Normandy and the summer of 1944. And the Allied forces, the Canadian portion of the Allied forces, pushed through France, Belgium, and the west side of Holland and pushed the Germans through the top where we lived back into Germany. And it got pretty rough around the areas that we were, and saw far too much that we should not have seen. And, and then the next thing that stood out for me and changed my life is meeting the Canadian Army that had a small section of the Army Red Cross behind our house about 30 feet away from us.
Oh, wow.
And every morning they would feed us bread, and the cheese and the butter was bigger than the bread. And we called everybody Johnny. We didn't speak the language, but we did. And it made such an impression on me that I always knew from that point forward. When I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada.
I love it.
Wow. And I wanted to go when I was 17, but my parents wouldn't let me. And then I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force for 2 years. And then I went to Canada when I was 23 years old. And with very little money. And I wanted to start from the bottom up because academically, I was not a success story in Holland. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And so they said to my parents, my parents said, what should we do with this guy? They said, oh, send him to the mentally challenged school. He said, no, we're not going to do that. And he said, well, let's teach them a trade. Yeah. And so I was 12 and a half years old. And my dad had a friend that had a furniture factory. So the school came out on Friday. All the kids had summer holidays, but not for me. He bought me 3 sets of coveralls. I was small, so I had to roll them up. The crotch was by my knees, and not very cool, but popular now, but not then. And a little bike, became a laborer. I'm proud of that today. But then it was kind of looked down at, and they said, oh, you're dumb and you're stupid. You know all this stuff. But I always was a believer. I knew I was just as good as anybody else. Not better than, but just as good.
Yeah.
So I felt I had to do what I wanted to do. My dream was to come to Canada. But the other part was I wanted to prove to me that I was just as good as everybody else. So the dream was to go to Canada, build a lumber mill, and start with nothing, virtually nothing. So I left Holland with 1 suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and very little money. And so came to Flew into Montreal, took the train from Montreal to Vancouver. My God, that's a long way. and so, and when I came off the train, went to the immigration department in Vancouver. Couldn't speak the language, didn't speak English, and didn't know anybody, didn't have a job. But fortunately, there was a German fellow there, and I could speak some German. So I told him what I wanted to do. He said, go to Prince George, 500 miles north. He said, that's where they're building sawmills, and that's where the opportunities are. And so I did that, took the Greyhound, between 12 and 14 hours, bus ride. And when I came off the bus here in Prince George, now 60 years later, I'm still here in Prince George. In the distance, I can still see where the Greyhound station was. So I came off the bus with my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times. I had exactly $25.47.
Wow.
But I had lots of attitude. I will always avoid the negative. And if it is a tough day, I know tomorrow will be better. Even when I was young, I always had that passion. Whatever I do, I give it 125%. And work ethic, I work harder even now than anybody else. I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late. And
Yep.
and I still do that today.
That,
And so now that's 60 years later. Obviously, a lot of things have happened in between. Yes, I did build my lumber mill and 10 other companies, actually, but it's not about that. I've been quite successful. Wrote a book about it, Against All Odds. And and then the other part that happened to me is then I never, even when I was successful already here, and and I was already here for 30 years, and everybody said, "Oh, you're so successful." I didn't feel that way.
mm,
I always knew I was different. I didn't know why until one day I walked into a store here, January 1997, and I picked up a book. And if I'm in my boardroom of one of my companies right now, I have a studio, and I have the actual book that I had picked up in January of 1997 there. And the book's title was Driven to Distraction by Dr. Halliwell. I don't know
okay.
why I picked up the book, and it was about ADHD. And I said, "Oh my God, that's me." And and so and and the more I read the book and the more I got to know about it, check Google and all the other kind of things, I was then already 57 years old. It was January 1997. I had been here already for 32 years, and that book changed my life. And then the more I read about it, the more I got to understand it, the more I realized it's a superpower. And so, and, and so, and as I become more knowledgeable about it and more aware of the frequency of occurrence, initially I thought, from what I read, maybe 8% of the population. I believe it was much higher than that. Now, the interesting part is for our friends watching our podcast, your podcast, is that I do podcast, and my podcast number 203 on the brink is with Dr. Halliwell, who is the author of that book, has written 18 books. He wrote that book, Driven to Distraction, in 1993. I bought it in 1997, and I had a podcast with him probably about a year ago, in my podcast number 203. And as we had the conversation, I suggested to him, he's the expert, although I lived it. I said to him, I believe initially that the frequency of occurrence, male and female, was around 8%. And then I started to realize it's much higher than that, maybe as high as 20%. He said, no, John, more than 25%. I agree with him.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I found, I've been involved in companies and board of directors and very involved. And there's a lot of people that have been very, very successful. The other thing that I suggested to Dr. Halliwell is that of all the successful is the operative entrepreneurs and business people and other persons that I met, that I believe that probably 50% of them are ADHD. He said, no, John, 75%.
Yeah.
I agree with him.
Yeah.
And Dr. Halliwell is ADHD and has dyslexia. So do I.
Yeah.
And so at one point, so what I also did is I thought I had a book about that. So I wrote this book about it. Now, what you may find interesting, I don't know if you can see it, the price of the book.
$25.47.
That's what it is.
The amount of money you had. I love it.
Yeah. So, and then the other one I'm going to show you, one more book that I did, is because that is very important to me too. Fitness, both mentally, physically, diet, all those kind of things. So I wrote a book about that, is that living young, dying old. And actually, that's a picture of me. I'm the oldest.
Making me look bad.
I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So so that's kind of who I am.
That's you're a hell of a guy based on that story right there. I mean, you're one of a kind, obviously. I mean, how did taking it back a ways, like how did you get into how did you open your first business?
Yeah. So and as I indicated earlier, so I dreamed of going to Canada, right? And then obviously already at 12 and a half years old, I started working in a furniture factory. And then my grandfather was a master carpenter. My dad came back after the war, fortunately, but he was never the same again. We can talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But so that he was in lumber. And so in Holland, it's not uncommon, very common actually, that the sons follow what their parents were doing or their dad, particularly in my case. But I loved lumber. And then I loved business. And although I was not overly successful in our traditional schooling, but I was always interested in listening to successful business persons. So if they gave presentations, I went out of my way to listen to them and figure out what made them successful. Why are they different? And so then hence for me is that obviously what I wanted to do is prove to me that I was just as good as anybody else. I had no idea about ADHD at that point, obviously. And so for me, it was a question of not only following my dream, going to Canada, going to the West Coast, that's where all the timber is, but building my own lumber mill and starting with nothing. And so that then became my dream. And so when I came here off the bus with my $20.47, I had to find a job, and I became a cleanup man initially in a lumber mill. And then my dream was to become a lumber pilot. And then it was my dream to become a supervisor at the green chain. And all of that happened in about a year and a half. I was the superintendent of one of the larger mills here in northern British Columbia. And that didn't go fast enough for me. So then I got involved in an option to own part of a little sawmill of all places in the Yukon Territory. And for a guest watching, is saying, okay, John, where is the Yukon Territory? Well, it's right next to Alaska. What else is unique about it? Well, what is unique about it, it's about 1,000 miles north of Vancouver. And I was born in Holland. And if you ask me, so what's the climate like in Holland? I say, well, the difference between winter and summer is that the rain is colder in the wintertime. So, and what is unique then about for this Dutch guy that came here and then went to Watson Lake. So what were the interesting parts about it? Well, there is virtually no access there. So if something breaks down, you better figure out how to fix it because you cannot just run to the store. And then the other part is that 6 months of the year, it's winter. And it gets, the coldest that I've seen it is 62 below zero.
Oh my gosh.
And so I was there for 5 years and then left there, ended up owning half the town. Really, it's all in my book, Against All Odds. And so then in July of, and actually I incorporated Forest Products Ltd., the first company, in June of 1975, 50 years ago.
Wow.
And so how did I do it? I had very little money, virtually none, when I came from Watson Lake. Did a business plan, dropped it off at every business in town, got turned down by every single one of them. But I stayed the course, made changes to my business plan. What I needed is $25,000 to start a lumber company. And then after the 12th time, I went back to one bank that showed some interest. Obviously, I lacked equity. And I still remember it like just today. Again, I was there, talked to the bank guy that was looking at my file. He said the manager's name was John Weems. He was about 5 booths over from where we were sitting. He said, okay, let me take this to John again, your business plan. And I still remember it like just today. So then I was sitting there waiting, and I heard Bay in the best, give him the money, give him.
They were tired of seeing you.
And why did he do that? Well, because, I say this respectfully, he had worked with a number of Dutch people in another area, and he liked that approach that they have. Usually they stay the course because they have to, started from nothing and then worked hard. And I had all those elements, I guess. And maybe it was a good day for him. And so now 50 years later, we have gone far beyond that. We're probably the largest value-added manufacturer in Canada, if not in North America. And we have 4 silos, actually. The one is lumber manufacturing. The other one is warehousing, distribution, and logistics. We're probably the largest company in Northern British Columbia. The other one is real estate, residential, commercial, and industrial. Very active there as well. And the other one is media. And I do books, I do podcasting, and I do a platform and a number of other things, do a presenting and all that sort of things.
Man,
so
incredible journey. Like, this is wild. I'm hanging on every word. I worked in a plywood mill for a little while on the patch line, and my sister was on the green chain. So my heart is, I left there. I had to leave. I couldn't do it anymore. It's a tough gig, but I mean, it's a good gig, and it supports a lot of families, and it's a good job. But I didn't see myself there for the next 30 years, working the line, man. So when you got that loan, that $25,000, what was it like walking out of the bank?
I said, what do we do now? But I already had made arrangements. I leased a little old mill that was really not operating anymore. I had a business plan. And so the advantage that I had, Tim, and with your background, you can appreciate that. I had experience, hands-on experience, and I watched all the things that made others successful. And then obviously here, very quickly, I went from a lumber piler to a green chain puller to green chain foreman to superintendent of the mill, operating the mill, first the back end, then the front end, and then managing a small lumber mill where every problem that you got, you had to find a solution. It's way back up in the Yukon Territory. And so that experience still serves me well today. And then the other part, but a lot of people say to me, how do you do all this stuff that you do? You're doing podcasting, you're doing books, you have 10 companies, you do this, that, and the other thing. I say ADHD. That's how I do it.
Perfect. It's a superpower, like you said, and you're doing what you love, and that's the key, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so age is just a number, but what is critically important is obviously exercise. I don't do this because of, I simply do that. That motivates me going to the gym.
Yeah.
Today I had leg day. I just about crawled out of the gym and into my truck, but I'm okay now. No, I,
Yeah.
I really give it all that I can, but I
That
like,
it's incredible. I mean, at your age, I look at people in their even 40s, 50s, 60s who are nowhere even close to where you're at right now, and it's like, "Oh, I this excuse mentality, I can't do it, it's too hard," and it's like 84 years old, and you're crushing it. And that's
no, I cheat.
were you born that way, or is it just
I believe
or
I was, Tim, because, that I still remember we saw far too much, right? So that we should not have seen. And my dad, after he came back from the war being underground, he really never was the same again. And the relationship was never again. Alcohol became an issue, but he had PTSD, stayed with him forever. And so same for me. PTSD is still very much part of my life. And then the inner child, actually, I didn't even know what it was. And I had counseling at one point in our relationship. Is now my wife. But when we had the counseling, we had some issues we're trying to deal with. And the counselor said, maybe I should talk to John alone about what they call the inner child.
Mhm.
I never even heard about that. And so when we did, very emotional and, was amazing. But again, the fear of having the one parent only and always being under stress and seeing people around your area being dragged out of their houses and
Mm.
sent either into work camps in Germany or, Jewish people living in our neighborhoods that would be dragged in and ended up in, obviously, and never came back.
Do you remember?
So but
you
we saw
do you
far too much.
do you remember, when your dad came home and what that was like and how your
Yeah,
mother reacted?
they it was all at the time that they were still trying, they meaning the people in our community. First, happiness, obviously, and all the flags came out. And then they picked up the underground people that were collaborators.
Mm.
And right in front of our house, there was a canal. And some of the people, they shaved their hair off and some people got shot. And we'd be standing there more or less watching that from that kind of a thing. And at the same time, all the happiness, all those things, so much happened emotionally that, everybody was excited. But then as time went forward, you know, the things had to come back to a sense of normality. And now when I do presentations, which I do a lot of, and entering to young people, always around Liberation Day, why is the 2 minutes of silence? What really does it mean? And I always try to go to 2 or 3 different schools in British Columbia, but every year to tell them what it meant to me because I'm one of the few people left that was
Yeah.
there, right? So, but the that always stays with you, and then with the family, and that some people respectfully maybe have the idea that once the war is over, everything goes back to normal. It doesn't. It may take a generation, maybe more than that. And how precious we are in North America. And I fly around a lot. I do a lot of business here in British Columbia and in Canada, but also in the United States. And I fly around a lot. I always sit by the window if I do. And I look outside and I say, it's paradise.
Yeah.
It is paradise. And I say that virtually every day because I know what the alternative means. And if I look around the world, I look to Eastern Europe, the Ukraine, the Middle East, Venezuela, Cuba, China, and I can go Russia, go on and on and on, how fortunate we are. And I hope that we will preserve a democratic rule of government and not get dictatorships, because the examples are all over how destructive that can be. But I think our system, both in the US, Canada, and other places, Western Europe, is strong enough to hopefully to avoid dictatorships.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, it's it's always a balance, and people always assume that things are going to stay the same, and things change quickly. And
Yeah,
I'm a Iraq War veteran for
yeah.
good or bad. I don't subscribe to that war any.
No,
I came out of there, and we went in there thinking it was a great
you
great
you
thing
had
to
to
do.
do what you had to do, right? So you are part of the army.
Yeah, but coming back and getting out of that and looking back, I'm like, "Man, that was the wrong move, and, we shoulda never went in there," and that
That's it.
makes me sad, that
Yeah,
our country would do something like that to another country 'cause it's not I appreciate our veterans, and I appreciate all they do, and, that it's higher people above us that make those decisions, and, when you're in the military, you follow orders, but you know, do you? That's the real question. Muhammad Ali didn't,
yeah.
So,
Yeah,
uh,
it makes you wonder because you were there, I was there, and the result of it is devastating to the people around it, and obviously the ones that got hurt physically, but and families that lose, the part of the family because of it. That saying, "Does it have to be this way?" And then looking at the Ukraine and Russia and looking at Venezuela, and I can go on and on and on and on. That I'm not sure, and I say that respectfully, and that's why when the opportunity presents itself, I was there. I've seen it. I lived it, and I have an obligation to share it with others, and I do that. How precious it can be and how fortunate we are in North America.
we're very very lucky, and you took that opportunity and that gift that was given to you to survive that war because it is a gift, in especially in World War II. There was just such devastation everywhere. And you made something of yourself, and so those people's sacrifices, I believe, were not in vain because you took that opportunity to live and to thrive, and it's very you know
And to share it
admirable.
with others as well, Tim, that to me is always very important that, to do presentation to young people in particular. And it's always amazing. Actually, I did a couple of schools again this November, Remembrance Day. And if you have 1,000 young kids, like high school grades 7, 8, and forward, that they are just amazing how much attention they pay.
Yeah,
Amazing,
yeah.
and so and that part to me is always important to share with them.
Well, I think that it's they don't get a lot of actual people speaking to them. Everything is
Exactly.
done on these devices, and we're doing podcasts, so I'm contributing to that. But we're also spreading a message of, there is other things outside of this digital world that you live in, and
Exactly.
so they don't expect that. They don't have that really. It's just the teacher is teaching, and then they're all on their phones. So to be
Exactly.
focused on somebody is and hearing a powerful story. I mean, you're doing God's work, man.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So I started this podcast about, like I said, about 4 months ago, and I've had kind of a weird life. I am a veteran. My son or my dad was a pastor, so a minister, and I've suffered from PTSD for almost 20 years, and really bad PTSD. And when I came back from Iraq couple years later, my best friend, my brother, was killed in a car accident, and just have had kind of a lot of things happen to me that really affected me. I was in law enforcement for 10 years and dealt with a bunch of trauma with that. And so, me, the only thing that worked for me, I tried the counseling, I tried the therapies and everything, and medicines, and nothing worked. And so I sound like a broken record on my podcast, but if somebody's watching this for the first time, I actually ended up doing psychedelics, which helped me. Veterans, they're using those nowadays to help veterans, and I had to go outside of the country. I did it legally in a medical facility, and it changed my life. And now I'm just wanting to spread the message of there's so many other people out there who have had these incredible lives and suffered from PTSD, or have made it through those traumas and been successful. And I just want to share that with people, that.
So what is psychedelics?
So I did ayahuasca, and that is a medicine from Colombia and Peru and kind of the Amazon jungle area. It's a
Okay.
vine that is mixed with another leaf, and it turns. It's a brew basically. It kind of looks like a muddy coffee,
Okay.
and real thick. And it basically it's DMT, dimethyltryptamine, is the substance or the compound, and it takes you on a journey of self-reflection, and you deal it's a very, very powerful non-recreational drug, and where I did it was in a, you know, very safe, secure environment with people there
Right.
to help you and everything. But I mean, it connects you, they say it merges you back with your soul. It does. I
Okay.
mean, it's 4 different nights. I all the trauma, all the different life experiences that I had that were unresolved, I basically had to relive a lot of that stuff. But it wasn't. Some of it was very scary, but some of it was the most healing, incredible journey I went on during this trip. And at the end of it, I mean, now I understand, like, all of those things happened to me in my life. But those are just things that happen. That isn't who I am. That isn't something that I have to live with for the rest of my life. It's just that's part of my story. And it was like a light switch. It literally knocked the PTSD, anxiety, depression right out of me. And it's been over, yeah, about a year and, you know, 2 to 3 months. And I mean, it's not even it's a light switch. It's just gone. And
So did you go? So was it a one-time kind of a thing,
so they
and
do
you
they
had
do
to go physically someplace?
yeah, I physically went down to Costa Rica to a place called Rhythmia Life Advancement Center.
Okay.
And so it's a very nice bougie Marriott run place. A lot of people go there. A lot of the who's who go there. The you know Joe Rogan's friends, and Martin Luther King Jr. is on the board of director.
Oh,
Michael Beckwith, like the who's who, and also my brother-in-law is Earl Koski, and he's a very successful businessman, and he bought into this place. And so I had never even heard about psychedelics, but he knew that I
mm,
was, I
yeah.
was, yeah, I was dealing with a lot of trauma and stuff, and so he had done it about a year before. Just
Okay.
kind of long story, but he ended up buying into this place because it was such an amazing place. And so he made the offer for me to go down there and try it. And I mean, it changed my life. It was incredible. And they are doing a lot of healing with psychedelics, MDMA, psilocybin, ayahuasca. Y- so there's a whole bunch of different stuff. Ayahuasca is what I used. But yeah, it's like it was literally a light switch. So it's 4 ceremonies. The first night, you kinda they walk you through they don't they call it Mother Ayahuasca, and it's a very sacred thing that they do. They have these ceremonies, and they call it the Maloka, and there's beds everywhere, and it's dark, and they bring in these indigenous, shamans, and they serve this medicine, and everybody goes and lays on their bed, and you go on kind of a a journey inside your mind. And it's hard. I mean, there's a lot of purging, they say, that's vomiting and, you know, using the restroom and, but,
Well, how long were you there?
so it's a week. You get there on Saturday or Sunday to the following week. So on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you take the ayahuasca and, they have their ceremonies. They last between, 8 upwards of, 15 hours, depending on which night. The last night is, the grand finale, and they serve a little bit different medicine called yahe. And that starts at 6 p.m. and it ends at 8 in the morning. But I mean, if I took this whole sleeve of tattoos that I have
Yeah.
is all from that experience.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you see a UFO, there's, spirit guy, uh, praying mantis and stuff. And I'm not usually the tatted up guy, but it was such a profound experience that I had to document it. So this is only year old. It changed my life. And, but
So,
you see God, you talk to God, you go into the universe. I mean, I I saw my brother. I trauma that I had from law enforcement, losing a poor young kid, dealt with that. All my Iraq stuff, my childhood, just on and on. The healing, it was incredible, and everybody has a little bit different experience. Mine was very extreme. I wrote about every single night that I had this experience. I came back to my room and immediately documented what I had seen, and it's very descriptive. I'll send it to you if you're interested.
I like
Uh,
that. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, and it's not written in a book or anything. It's a
No, no.
PDF that I just typed out, and it's kind of, all over the place. But it was a hell of an experience, and people that I know have gone down there since I've gone because I've shared that with them, my story, and they've gone down there, and people who've dealt with, people close to me who've dealt with a lot of like sexual abuse and other stuff, have gone down there, and it's changed their life too. It's incredible, and it's unfortunate that it's not legal here, but I think
So
eventually it's
why
going to
is it not legal here?
it's a Schedule
What
One
makes it
drug.
illegal?
Schedule One in the United States, everything's Schedule One. I mean, up into all the way to marijuana, and so they say it doesn't have any medical benefit, which is completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um, but the Amazonian tribes have been doing this stuff for 10,000 years, and it is not recreational. Believe me, you're not going to want to just be doing ayahuasca all the time, but it's it's incredible. Man, I can't, the type of experiences you have are very hard to explain, and you would almost sound schizophrenic if you tried to tell somebody like, "Oh, and then Jesus showed up, and there was angels around me everywhere." But that stuff does happen. But when you come out of it, you're normal. It's not like it doesn't
No.
stick with you.
So is there if they're saying, "Okay, I'm gonna look at Google and see what exactly
Yeah,
happened," that
yeah,
is it something available like that?
for sure. Yeah, yeah.
So what would be the how do you find out about it? Because I'm sure a lot of people are watching us that say, "Oh, I'm interested."
Yeah. Well, so you can go to the place that I went to, and I've been plugging them a lot, and I'm like, when are you going to pay me? Because I talk about this all the time, but no, but it was rhythmia.com, rhythmia, like a kind of heartbeat, and but yeah, my podcast, I talk all about a lot of different stuff, but a lot of it ties into my healing journey because it was so profound
If
for
you
me.
read
But yeah, if you type in rhythmia or ayahuasca,
I
you'll
get
you'll
Scott to write it down.
all right. Yeah. It's incredible stuff. I mean, if you were ever gonna do it, I people of all ages go there, 18 into their 80s, and it's a journey,
Male, female?
male, female. This place is this guy who bought or who opened up the place, his name is Jerry Powell, and he was a extremely well-to-do businessman. He made $100 million on one of his companies, but he was just turned, to drugs and alcohol, and just was going destroying his life, and so he had, counseling and therapists and was in and out of rehabs trying to save himself, and finally somebody mentioned it to him and he went down to I forget, it was Colombia or somewhere down there, and he had this experience, and it literally changed his life and, saved him from the trajectory he was on of death, and, he he went back and talked to his therapist who was, a UCLA very prominent doctor he had been working with for a long time and told him what happened, and, at that time, Jerry was, employing this guy full time to keep him alive as his therapist. And and so it the doctor went down there with him and did it with him, and they both had this crazy experience and decided,
Oh
you
my
know what,
God.
we want to spread this to the world and help
Yeah,
people. And so they
yeah,
bought a big chunk of land off of the Marriott down in Costa Rica that wasn't
okay.
being used. And so it's a very nice place,
So they are involved in it now financially as well.
not the Marriott, but just these 2 bought off
Yeah,
that
yeah.
portion of it. Yeah, and so they opened it up and yeah, they run it. He's the CEO and founder, Jerry is. But my brother-in-law, just after COVID, he was very successful and made a lot of money during COVID, and so he ended up buying in a portion, and he's on the board of directors, and so but it's an incredible place. I mean, it's the who's who of business and stuff go there, but that's not why you go there.
Yeah,
There's other places out there that have this same medicine, and I don't care if you go to the jungle, have at it, but
yeah.
look for that healing for people that need it.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I hadn't either. I listened to Joe Rogan podcast and Sean Ryan, and they're obviously large podcasts, and
Did
so he
they have experience with it like Joe Rogan and those guys?
so so Joe Rogan, I don't know if he's ever done ayahuasca, but Ron White is a comedian that is best friends with Joe Rogan, and actually Ron White is on the board of directors at this place, Rhythmia,
Oh, no.
because he went down there because he was dealing with an alcohol problem, and he went down to Costa Rica to try to resolve this alcohol issue that he had. He went to Rhythmia, and uh, he stopped drinking. It changed his life, and you know, I don't know the logistics of how it worked out, but now Ron is on the board of directors down there as well, just because, like, Jerry's a smart business guy. He brings in people who have a name and can help spread this message.
Is it
Um,
expensive for
for
people
the
that
average person, yeah, for you or business people, probably not. It's probably, I think it's in between $5,000 and $8,000 depending on what kind of accommodations you want. Yeah, to change your life, I mean, I would have paid $30,000 if I knew what I was going to get out of it.
yeah, if you
And
have an alcohol problem or another problem of some sort, you probably spend that in 2 months anyway.
yeah,
And
100%.
and your life becomes shorter and shorter.
Yeah.
I
So
like it, so yeah, I never heard of it.
yeah, you should look into it. I mean,
I will.
it's run meticulously. It's
Yeah,
very professional. You get
yeah,
massages and yoga and all this stuff. But
yeah.
it's not a hippy dippy place. It's just a
I know.
really nice place.
Yeah.
And so,
So you
but
stayed in the Marriott or in the Hyatt or whatever it was
no,
there?
the facility, it has its own rooms there, so
Okay.
it's separate, and it's not affiliated with the Marriott at all
Yeah,
anymore. But
probably it's a good idea to have
yeah,
have
I don't.
for
Yeah,
this
yeah.
alcohol. Yeah, yeah. Give me a bottle of scotch, doggone it.
Yeah, that's the problem. The first time I went there, I love a margarita, and I kind of used that to help deal with some of my PTSD. I was never a raging alcoholic or anything like that, but yeah, I came in there on Saturday one night and I was scared. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. It's a crazy experience, but you walk in there and next door I could hear the mariachi band playing, and I was like, geez, I just want to go around the corner, get out of here and go have a margarita. That was
Yeah,
yeah, it was
exactly.
it was
So very, very interesting is, I like it. I don't drink and I don't do alcohol, and so, but I like it. I had never heard of it, but what always amazes me is that how much of the, and I say that respectfully, of the medical community in North America, where we pay more than anywhere else around the world, with the least amount of results in a lot of cases, how dominated it is by money
Yep.
and, and how controlled it is in terms of what comes in, what doesn't come in.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of people on this podcast. I'm only up to 55 episodes, but all been around the healing, and I've had a couple of therapists and psychologists and stuff on just to talk to them, and I
Yeah.
kind of share this experience with them, and almost everybody is like, "Oh, no, 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 no," because that's diving into their pocket, that's taken away from their business. If you can be cured in 1 week and don't have to have years of
That's not good.
therapy, it's not good for business.
No.
S so I understand, from their side, but
Yeah.
I'm not gonna keep my mouth shut, you
Oh,
know?
no, no, and
Yeah,
that's a given, right? So that's the problem that we have because, statistics show us that, both the US and Canada, we're right on the bottom
yeah,
compared to the rest of the world and saying, what's wrong with this picture?" You know?
yeah, yeah,
So
man, John, I don't wanna take up all of your day. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, and I'd love to chat with you again. You're a very fascinating guy, and I mean that sincerely.
I yeah, I like it as well, Jim, so what I'm gonna do, where are you located?
I'm in Southern Oregon, so,
Okay. So,
yeah,
I get Scott to get your address. I'm gonna sign copies of my books and send them to you.
I would love
Uh,
that.
yeah, and then, let's make sure we stay in touch,
Absolutely, I would love to. Yeah,
and then,
I
we will, give you a 5-star, obviously,
alright,
so
right back at you. Right
and
back
I
at
think you're
you.
doing the right thing. You're gonna be successful. Is the key is from my perspective, staying the course,
Yep,
be predictable, and and what I do, I believe, is be. I'm just being me,
yeah,
and at the same time, the project that we're doing is right across the board, right across the globe, and it is still on its infancy and it's growing.
yeah.
But, yeah, I'm gonna set up a platform hopefully in the next 3 to 4 months, but I'll stay in touch with you.
I hope you do. I really do. You have an incredible story, and I'm trying to surround myself with the people who bring you up, not tear you down. And that's what I've
Thank
been
you.
doing. And I've been very lucky with some of the people I know, but I would love to chat with you more, and
Okay.
it would be an honor. So thank you
Okay.
much. And
We'll do that, Tim.
all right.
Appreciate it. You take
Thank
care
you.
now.
You as well.